really, I think starting with a place where you create a space for them to process and tell their story, because again, it's something that has such a huge impact on them, and even being able to identify what that has been and allowing them that space to kind of unpack that is where I also even helping them recognize this as a loss, and a loss is something that we will always grieve, and how to really be on the lookout for what is coming up for them individually, because again, even if they are together as a couple, adoptive parents I'm seeing, both of them individually will be experiencing this loss in their own way that might be very different from one another. And so allowing them to see those differences, but also be supportive to one another and be supportive to themselves. And so in acknowledging that, this is a loss that might be bringing up previous losses they've had, such as, loss of, infertility, loss of birth, miscarriage, loss related to even what they hoped or thought would be their child, and then that drastically being changed in this disruption. And being aware of the fact that this could be triggering those other ones, and understanding that's why this might feel so emotionally challenging, and giving them even just that ability to recognize what they're needing to help them through this loss. That might be taking a break from the process. That might be really making sure they're making time for self-care. That might be, if they've gotten baby items, they might want to have that physical reminder, something that is removed from their day-to-day site for a period of time, whether they store that away, give that to a friend or family member, donate it, and also even just taking the time that they need from their day-to-day. Maybe they need to take some space and time from work. Maybe they have upcoming family events or upcoming friend's baby shower that they need to give themselves permission to not go to, because again, right now they're needing to really comfort and take care of themselves and allow themselves to heal.
Yeah, and that's a really important point that you make as far as if it is a couple who is adopting, that they maybe are probably likely to be processing the loss differently. What are some of the common emotions that individuals might be working through as they are processing a disrupted match?
So some of the emotions that we're working through are anger, resentment, frustration. That could be directed towards the process itself, directed towards birth parents because they're changing their decision. Of course, there's going to be some sadness, loss of hope, worry, anxiety, fear. Will this ever happen for me? Will we ever find and have our child? Will this ever go away, this pain that I'm feeling? And so those are some common emotions I see for adoptive families. And then even on the flip end too, working with birth parents and their end, I see them going through a lot of guilt and shame, feelings of worry and fear and sadness too, because they're also thinking what do adoptive parents think of me? Do they hate me? And even a lot of times too, that loss of connection that the birth parents had with adoptive parents, through the whole match process, they were really, as adoptive parents there for them during a very difficult time in their life, and might have been the only people, fully supporting them or fully even excited about their pregnancy. And that's a loss on that end too for birth parents. But I think with adoptive parents, it can be just this mixed bag of emotions. We tend to think, emotions are very singular. We're only feeling one thing at a time. But with emotions, and especially with this process and disruption, we can feel in so many things. And it feels like we're on this roller coaster ride that we feel like we're going crazy at times. When will I get off this ride?
Right. I really appreciate you bringing that up about some of the emotions that the birth mom would be going through, because I think that's an aspect of this that people rarely consider. So I think you've already answered a lot of this next question, but let me just ask in case there's anything that you want to add in terms of top pieces of advice or guidance that you would give to a family that's dealing with this. Is there anything you want to add to what you've already said?
Yeah, I think my top piece of advice would be that this pain and hurt won't last forever. It's only temporary. And in time, you will heal. And to really make sure you're taking that time to heal, just like I mentioned earlier, whether that's a break from the process, to taking some time off from work, really diving into some self-care. And I think a big one too is to allow yourself to feel your feelings. It's human nature at times to try to avoid this because it's unpleasant, it's uncomfortable to feel this way, and we have to allow ourselves to feel that, or else we're going to get stuck in it. or we could just avoid it and avoid it and avoid it, and it doesn't mean that we've addressed it. And I think that's a big piece of advice that I give to adoptive parents, is to allow yourself to feel what you're feeling and just really do what you need to do to take care of yourself.
That's great. And I think that, of course, working through all this with a counselor can really help in a lot of ways. But I think one of the ways kind of brings me to my next point about how having experienced a failed match can really impact the rest of their adoption journey. And from a logistical perspective, one of the things that I see a lot is that the adoptive parents will then avoid every case that looks like that failed case on paper, right? And even if that failed case was a really great opportunity and was really likely to go through, with other opportunities that come up, they look at that and they go, oh, those circumstances are too similar, that feels too scary, and they might end up avoiding a lot of great opportunities, and maybe even gravitating to ones that are riskier or worse for them in some way, just because they're different than the one that they experienced. How do you see going through a failed match kind of impacting the rest of their adoption journey?
Exactly what you said is what I see too, is that, that increase of like that worry and fear that adoptive parents have because of what they've gone through with that disruption, and that tendency to want to avoid, as you said, situations with similarities. And then I even see it on the flip end where you might even be trying to control more aspects, or what you think that you can control, because really there's many things that we try to control, but really we can't. And that can come up because we're so hypersensitive to the, an upcoming match or a situation that we are, wanting to put our letter out for presentation. And we're wanting to control it by maybe staying in touch more with, the expectant parent during the process and checking in because we're needing that reassurance, or we're needing to talk to our adoption professional more and more because we're wanting reassurance to help kind of taper some of that worry and fear and anxiety we're experiencing. We might even at times try to control or be heavily involved with, like, at the hospital setting. Maybe that's where, the disruption occurred the previous time. And so we have this notion where as adoptive parents, where maybe we're throughout the whole time and we're really not getting that space for birth mom to identify her needs and having time one-on-one with a child. We have a fear that that might change her mind, and we've gone through that before. And so we're just looking for all these aspects to control and really it can actually end up being self-sabotaging or really prohibit us from making this deeper relationship and connection with birth mom, and really end up having the same result, as a result where maybe we don't get to have the experience or relationship we really wanted because we let some of those fears and worries take over.
Yeah, I think those are all really important points. You've also mentioned about, families thinking through what they need and do they need to take a break from the process or not. And I'm sure this is quite individual, but what is your recommendation, at least for things to consider, if families are trying to decide, should they take some time to grieve this loss before resuming their adoption journey, or should they jump right back in?
Some things I would recommend them to consider is, one, where are they both at individually? Because I think that it's important for them to if they are a couple, to be making this decision and choice together, even if they may not both necessarily be in agreement, but one is feeling like I need some space. I would encourage both to respect that, because it's being that united front. It's really helpful during a time like this. But also even considering, where am I at, like, with my mindset? Where am I at emotionally? Am I in a mindset where, the thought of being, chosen right now feels like overwhelming and makes me feel like this is, would be too much, or I would be with my interactions with birth mom? That's something to take a look at, because that would be a sign to me that you might need a space, you might need a break. Or if you're at a place where it's popping up in your day-to-day, these thoughts and worries and sadness, or feeling like this is not going to happen for you, or just the memories of what, this process was up until that disruption. And that to me also shows that you might need some space. You might need to allow yourself a break from that process. Or even if you guys do decide that you want to continue to be presented, what are you doing in the meantime, though, to simultaneously be taking care of yourself? So that, I know I keep mentioning self-care, that looks different for everybody, but self-care can be anything from journaling to creating a memory box to, even getting outdoors, spending time with loved ones, giving yourself space for like self-reflection or like soothing activities like reading, taking a bath. Again, self-care is just very different for everybody, what it feels right for them. But how are you also doing that during this process? It's back in right after a failed or disrupted adoption.
Right. And this next point is something that you've alluded to, but I think it's worth kind of discussing a little bit more explicitly. So again, obviously this experience is different for everyone, especially for those who have already grieved the loss of the concept of having a biological child. But I imagine it's even harder for those who have experienced other additional significant losses, such as miscarriage or even the stillbirth of a child. So can you talk about how their experience might be different here, and any advice you might have for someone, who sort of falls into that category?
I think that their experience can be different because it is more complex with having some additional losses that relate to family building and that dream and hope and desire they have to start a family or to add to their family, because they've gone through losses where that's already, they've already experienced that at a high level. And that can come back up full force as if it just happened all over again when we experience a loss of a similar nature, because it can trigger that to come back to the forefront. And so they might be experiencing even more of a sense of hopelessness, or even more of a sense of just sadness of this, is this ever going to be for me? And it can really have a big impact just on their overall, just mindset and psyche. And what I would encourage for, adoptive parents that are experiencing this is to really take a look at what they're going through and who are they leaning on for support, who are they able to talk to, and also even reminding themselves that this is, this loss of this disrupted adoption is not the same as what you've gone through. This is a different experience. This is a different situation. Because I think we have a tendency, with, again, human nature, to bring in past experiences that have similarities or have made us feel the same way, as if this is the same experience in the present as what we've already gone through. And it's not, it's different. And so I think focusing on the here and now and reminding yourself that this is, these are not interconnected experiences can help kind of differentiate the two. But I also encourage families that have gone through those, disrupted adoption and have had that past loss, what gives them comfort, what soothes them, and how are they making sure, again, that they're looking at this independently from past losses and not creating this mantra or narrative that it's, their family that they desire to have is never going to be. Because I think sometimes it can feel like that it's coming up for them.
Yeah, it's great. It's great advice. And my last question, and it might wrap right into what you just said, but in case there's something different to add, I just want to give you that opportunity. Any other experiences that a family may have had in their past that might make management of a failed match different or more difficult than that of another type of family that might cause you to give some different advice for one situation versus another?
I think it's taking a look at what's going on currently, because everybody has different experiences that they're going through with work, family life. Experience that I've had with families, stressors going on around that same time or during that same time of that disrupted adoption, that can add another layer. If we're going through the feelings and the fallout experience of a disrupted adoption while also dealing with work stress or dealing with, loss of a job or loss of a family member, or, here we are in, still coming through this COVID time where that can add another layer of stress and anxiety. And so again, what other things are going on in your life that might be adding into some of the emotions that you're having right now, and how to be aware of that. And again, I think that it really calls for adoptive parents to take a look at if I'm having such a hard time, understandably so, with where I'm at emotionally after this disrupted adoption, are there other pieces or things in my life that I also need to take a look at and tend to, and then also recognize that might be feeding into this, because I think those other stressors really do have an impact.
Yeah, I think that's really important to be aware of all of the aspects of what's going on in your life and how those are coming into play. Well, Catherine, this has been really, really valuable advice. I really appreciate